Good morning, class. Today we are learning 1-3 literal equations and formulas. And this is a continuation of topic 1 in the Envision Integrated Math 1 textbooks. And before we're doing that, we're going to do some reviews so that way you will know what kind of things you need to know before continuing the lesson. So previously we learned how to solve equations such as the following. Let's say you have something like 2 multiplied by 2x plus 5 is equal to 4x plus 2x minus 6. Okay, well, this is equations with variables on both sides, and you notice that because there are x's on the left, there are x on the left and some x's on the right. So to simplify that, we are going to perform distributive property on the left side of the equation. So this 2 multiplied by this 2x will become 4x. 2 times 2x is 4x. And 2 times positive 5 is positive 10. Then on the right side, I see that out of the 3 terms, 2 of which are like terms because they both have an x next to the coefficients. So you have 4x plus 2x. Think of like 4 apples plus 2 apples. You would say 6 apples instead of 6. So 4x plus 2x is 6x. And then you bring down to minus 6. Well, if you have 2 coefficients, one on the left and one on the right, we learned that we're going to eliminate the smaller coefficients. So for the 4x and the 6x, we're going to eliminate the 4x by subtracting 4x on both sides, like this. So you will left with, on the left, 10, and on the right, 6x minus 4x, which is 2x minus 6. Then from here, you have 2-step equations. So to continue isolate the x, I'm going to undo the minus 6 by adding 6 on both sides, like this. So 10 plus 6 will be 16 is equal to 2x. Okay, and then the negative 6 and positive 6, they cancel. Then at the end, you just have to divide both sides by 2 because there's a 2 multiplied by the x here. So the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. So we're going to say 1x. And then 16 divided by 2 is 8, right? In this case, we could say 8 equals x. Or you could write it with the letter first. It becomes x equals 8. So one of these 2 answers is correct. So that means the missing value that would make this equation true, in other words, to the left side of the equation equals to the right side of the equation only if x equals 8. Now we're going to learn the next lesson, which is 1-3 literal equations and formulas. First, I have to tell you what is literal equations. In the past, you learned a lot of formulas in elementary school. For example, in science class, you probably learned that if you multiply by the speed, multiply by time is equal to distance. Okay, and there are many ways to express the relationship between speed, time, and distance. So, and I think in one of the strategy is to draw something called a speed triangle, like this. So this looks like a pyramid, and we're going to put speed here, and we're going to put time here, and we're going to put distance here. Okay, so if you multiply speed and time, you get distance. But if you do distance divided by speed, because they look like a fraction here, distance divided by speed equals to time, or distance divided by time will equals to speed. And we could use a couple formulas to express this relationship. So instead of using the word speed, we usually use the letter R. And then instead of writing the whole word time, we're going to use the letter T. And then for distance, we're going to use the letter D. So I think in the past, you probably learned that R times T is equal to D because speed times time is equal to distance. So you have one formula that you have learned in the past, probably in science class, that RT is equal to D. Speed times time is equal to distance, or in some science class, rate times time is equal to distance. Or you could write distance divided by speed is equal to time. So you could use d over r is equal to t. Distance divided by speed is equal to time. Or you could say distance divided by time is equal to speed. So d over t is equal to r, like this. And all these three formulas are equivalent, and I could use algebra or properties of equalities to change one formula to look like the other. Well, let's check it out. So remember, one of the formula was RT equals D. Well, if I were to isolate T, what can I do on both sides? Well, since there's an R next to the T here, we could divide both sides by R, right? And then look at that. The r's cancel because you have if you have the same thing on the top and the bottom, a numerator and denominator of the fraction, they cancels out. So that means you're left with t is equal to d over r. Look at that. Aren't these two equations the same, right? Or if you don't want to do it that way, right? Let's say I'm going to let me just draw a divider like this, right? And like this. Well, if you were going to rewrite this formula, and if you want to isolate the r this time, right? So you don't want a t next to the r. You want to isolate the r. Well, since there's a multiplication relationship between r and t, you're going to divide t on both sides like this. So the t's will cancel, right? Again, same thing on the top and bottom of the fraction, they would cancel. So you're left with r is equal to d over t. Look at that. Aren't these two formulas exactly the same? It's just that the order might be different, but they both says that r is equal to d divided by t. Speed is equal to distance divided by time. So let's check out what is the meaning of a literal equations. Literal equations can use letters for both constants and variables. A formula is a kind of literal equation where one quantity is related to one or more other quantities. Look at this formula. I see that, well, there are letters, and these letters could represent numbers. If you know the number for the speed, how fast you're going, or if you know how much time you spend on your trip, which is the time, or if you know how far between your starting point and the ending point, which is the distance. So all these may represent some numbers if you know them, or they just represent variables if you don't know them, right? So, and we could always use properties of equality. In this case, we use division property of equality to kind of change the formula a little bit in terms of the way it looks, and it still represents the same thing. So we're going to take a look at some examples here. Well, example 1, we're going to take a look at a lot of formulas that you have learned in the past. So let's say if you have V is equal to L multiplied by W multiplied by H. Well, this formula seems familiar because this is a formula to represent the volume of a prism, rectangular prism. And the formula is to find the volume, it's the length multiplied by the width and multiplied by the height. If I were to ask you to solve this formula for L like this, okay? Let's say if I were to ask you to solve for L. So what you do is you take a look at this formula, V equals L times W times H. And your goal is to isolate the L. So solve for L means they want you to isolate the L. That means you don't want the W next to it, and you don't want the H next to the L. So to do that, since everything is multiplying each other, there's two ways to do it. You could divide it by W like this, one letter after another. Well, the W will cancel, so you're left with V over W is equal to L times H. Well, again, there's still letters next to the L, so you want to further isolate the L by dividing both sides by H. Now, it's kind of weird looking if you have things that are already on a denominator. So instead of putting another denominator on the left side, you're going to just put an H at the bottom like this, and then they cancel. So you're left with V is equal to W times H is equal to L. That means to find the length of the prism, all you have to do is you multiply the width and the height, and whatever the product is, you're going to have the volume divided by the product, and then that way you could find the length of the prism. And then this is your final answer. That's one way to do it. Another faster way would be like this. If you have V is equal to LWH and you want to do this in a faster, less steps, all you have to do is divide both sides by the two letters that you don't want that's next to the L. So next to the L there's W and H. You're going to divide them, so these cancel, and then there's nothing to cancel here, so you're left with just V over WH is equal to L. Both ways gets you the same answer. Well, let's take a look at the next example. Example 2. We're going to take a look at this little equation. A is equal to 1/2 times B times H. Do you recognize this formula? Yes, this is a formula to find the area. A stands for area of a triangle. And in the past, you learned that to find the area of a triangle, you multiply the base of a triangle with the height of the triangle, and then you're going to divide it by 2 or multiply by half to get the answer. And in this example, I'm going to ask you to solve for H. And this means that at the end, your answer should equal to, or your answer should look like H is equal to something. So the variable H should be isolated for your final answer. So let's actually rewrite the problem. A is equal to 1/2 times B times H. And to isolate the H, I have to get rid of the B that's next to the H, and I also have to get rid of the 1/2 that's on the same side of the H. So to do that, to get rid of the 1/2, we're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 2 over 1. 2 over 1. And the 1/2 and 2 over 1 will cancel each other, because 1/2 times 2 over 1, it just becomes 1, right? So those will cancel. So on the left side of the equation, you're left with 2 over 1 times A, which is 2A. And on the right side, you're left with B times H, so base times height. So you notice that on the right side of the equation, it's getting a little bit shorter. Now we're going to make it even shorter by getting rid of the B that is next to the H. So to get rid of the B, since the relationship is multiplication, we're going to use division property of equality, and we're going to divide B on both sides. So that way the B's cancels here. On the left side, you're left with 2A over B, and on the right side, you're left with H. So in other words, to find the height of a triangle, you're going to have the area multiplied by 2, and then you divide it by the base of the triangle to get the height of a triangle. And this is your final answer. Okay, that's example 2. In example 3, we're going to take a look at one more formula, which is also dealing with shapes. In the past, you learned this formula. P is equal to 2 times W plus 2 times L. Do you recognize this formula? Yes, this is a formula to find the perimeter of a rectangle. And it tells you that the perimeter of a rectangle is equal to 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. Because in a rectangle, there are 2 sides that are length and 2 sides that are width. And to find the perimeter, don't you add up all these 4 letters? So if you add W plus W, you get 2W. And if you add L and L, you get 2 L's. And then whatever the answers is, you add them together. So that's where the formula comes from. So to do that, well, first I have to tell you what to solve, right? So let's say if I would ask you to solve for W this time, that means I want you to isolate the W, okay? So let's rewrite the literal equation again, the formula. Well, you want to get rid of everything around the W. So to do that, I see that 2W, next to it, there is an entire term that I don't need. Remember, a term is something that is separated by plus or minus. So since there's a plus 2L, we're going to use the subtraction property of equality by subtracting 2L on both sides. So that way you could get rid of the entire term of 2L. So on the left side of the equation, P minus 2L, they're not like terms, so you're just going to write as P minus 2L as it is. And on the right side, you're left with 2W like this. Well, I see that on the right side, it's getting a little bit shorter. We're going to get it even more shorter by isolating the W. Well, next to the W, there's a 2, and between them is multiplication. So the opposite of multiplication is use division property of equality, and then divided by 2 on both sides. So on the left side, there's nothing I could combine like terms, so you just do P minus 2L all over 2 is equal to W. Hey, I see that now the W is isolated because it's solved for W. The W is isolated, so now that's my final answer, right? And there's two ways to write this because some students would write as W is equal to P minus 2L over 2. And some students would actually break down this fraction because we could rewrite it as P over 2 minus 2L over 2. And these two will cancel. So you're left with W is equal to P over 2 minus L. Well, one of these two answers is correct. They're both correct. And I believe that it is acceptable in this class for you to write your answer as this, where the fraction is kind of combined together, or this, where the fractions are separated by a addition or subtraction sign. Let's actually continue on example 3, because sometimes you will actually know the values of certain variables. Like for example, if I know that, well, for this formula, P is equal to 2W plus 2L, right? If I know that the perimeter ahead of time, which is 40 centimeters, let's assume the perimeter of the rectangle is 40 centimeters, and the length of a rectangle is 12 centimeters. Well, can I ask you to find what is the width of a rectangle? So there's two ways to do it. Let's say if I were to give you all this information and I want you to find the width of a rectangle, all you have to do is to substitute these letters with the numbers that you know. So now I know that the P is 40. I'm going to write 40 here. And then is equal to 2 times width plus 2 times, instead of writing the L, you write 12. And then from there, you just have to solve the equation like you always did in this chapter to find what is W equals to. So let's simplify. So 40 is equal to 2W plus 2 times 12 is 24. Well, you're going to solve this two-step equations by subtracting 24 on both sides like this. So you're left with 40 minus 24, which is 16, is equal to 2W. We'll divide both sides by 2, divide both sides by 2, and you get 8 centimeters is your width. So that means the width of the rectangle, when these numbers are true, is 8 centimeters. So you could use the original little equations to find what's the width, or if you want, you could use the new equation that you found to find the width of a rectangle. Let's try it. So that was method number 1. Well, to get to the same answer, right, all you have to do is write one of these equations out. You could do W is equal to P minus 2L all over 2. Let's substitute. So I know that the P again is 40. So 40 minus 2 times the length, which is 12. And then you divide everything by 2. Well, the good thing is all you have to do is use order of operations, PEMDAS, to simplify. So let's try that. So I see that there is a subtraction and a multiplication on the numerator. Let's simplify the multiplication. So you do 2 times 12 and you get 24. So you do 40 minus 24, which is 16 on the numerator. And then 16 divided by 2, you get 8. Hey, you still get 8 centimeters. You notice that the steps are the same. Didn't we do 40 minus 24 here? 40 minus 24, right? They matches. And then at the end, whatever that answer is, I divide it by 2, and I still get the same answer. So both ways will get you the same answer. And then that's pretty much at the end of the lesson. Thank you. Hey everyone, so to get to your homework, first you go to my CNUSD website, and then you click on the top of the page, my CNUSD, to log in. Well, you're going to type in your username and your password. Well, in this case, your student ID and your password. Then you go on to resource. I think for you guys it's resource. And then you go to a place called Pearson Savas Easy. Pearson Savas Easy. I'm not quite sure how you say that word, but it's Pearson Easy. Click on that. And you get to this pop-up page. And you're going to click on your class textbook. So you click on this right here. This is called Envision Integrated Mathematics 1 2009 Common Core. You click on that, a new window pop up again, and you see 3 different colors. The green color is your online textbooks. I teach from this textbooks. So if you don't have a copy, an actual copy, you could always go to here and click on the appropriate sections that we're teaching. But to find your online homework, you look at the reddish, orangish box in between, in the middle. It's called classes. So you're gonna click on here, click on classes, and depending on which period you're in, there will be new assignments here. So you're going to click on the click into the assignments, and then do your homework, and then that's it. Well, inside the homework, there are problems for you to work on, which allow you 3 attempts before they give you the final answer. So for example, for this problem, if you accidentally got a wrong answer, it'll tell you keep trying. Then you type in another answer, and if it's wrong, then it'll give you one more chance. And the third time that you got it wrong, it'll tell you the answer right away. So, but you could always get help by viewing an example on this part of the feature. So it'll tell you what to do step by step until the final answer. So you could always refer to the question, help view an example, or you could use help me to solve this to actually work it step by step. So there will be more answer boxes for you to fill in, but at least it will help you on your learning. Now for this problem, what do you do when you get it wrong, right? So well, to get a point or to get scores on that homework, then you click on similar questions and you keep practicing until you get it right. So if I were to click on similar questions, you notice that the questions changed. It's different from the previous one. So let's say this time you got it right. Let's say x is equal to 5, right? Well, if you got it right, it will tell you well done, okay, and then you move on to the next problem. So you click on next to move on to the next problem, like this. And once you finish all the problem, I believe the next thing is for you to make sure that you answer all the questions. If there's anything that it's not answered, make sure that you go back and look at it like this, right? So this is not answered. But let's say assume that if you finish your all of the questions on your homework, then you go to the bottom, I believe. Oh, actually, this button right here says submit my work. So you click on it, and then boom, I only got 3% just because I only answered one question correct, the rest I did not answer. So in order for you to get at least 80% or any good scores, make sure that you answer every single question and it's correct, not incorrect, for you to get as many points as possible on your homework. If you have any questions, please contact me.